Presidium citizens. The following is a special announcement by the County Reporter Protectorate.
Hey guys, welcome to another developer interview here at Without Parole. With me this week is the mysterious, the dark, we don't even know what he looks like, M from Truant Pixel, the makers of 2MD VR football, and of course the upcoming PSVR2 and, some other headsets game, Runner. I wasn't sure how I was going to feel about this, just seeing this kind of distorted image up here on the screen in place of your face, but I kind of like it, man. I really like it.
I think there are probably more than a few Ghost in the Shell fans that will appreciate it.
Oh, man.
And everybody else will be like, "What?"
Yeah, according to the questions I have here from the community, I think a lot of people are going to appreciate that quite a bit, honestly.
Oh, cool.
So listen, let's just dive right into it. We debuted the first gameplay and the first trailer, pretty much the first anything anyone's ever seen of Runner over on PSVR2 last week on here at Without Parole. But for anyone who missed it, or for anyone who's still got a lot of questions, can you give us the elevator pitch? Tell us a little bit about the game.
Yeah. Okay. Let me see if I have my copy memorized here. Runner is a 80s prestige anime-inspired arcade driving combat shooter.
It's good. It's a lot of genres you just threw together.
I'm trying to squeeze it all in there because there is a lot to unpack, I guess. And when I say prestige anime, and I don't know if that's actually a real term, it's basically talking about things that would be considered theatrical or near theatrical, things like OVA, original video animation, which was a big thing, probably still a big thing now, but was a really big thing back then. Not something that would necessarily be released in theaters, but also not something that you would necessarily see on broadcast television either. But it's visually and artistically is meant to harken back to that style, and obviously kind of casts a nostalgic eye on it, while at the same time trying to do some things in VR that would probably with traditional gaming. I don't know if we call it flat screen gaming or what have you, but with traditional gaming would not be considered it particularly unique, driving and shooting or arcade driving combat. But in VR, with the addition of the immersion that VR provides and the unique kind of tactile nature of the controls, becomes a novel experience because you're able to have a lot more fidelity over your shooting as well as control over the vehicle. That makes sense.
Yeah, and actually, I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's sort of something that got glossed over, I think, in PSVR something that I maybe wish I made more clear. Some people came away from the trailer thinking that it was a rail shooter and that you didn't have control of the motorcycle, but obviously that's not the case at all, right?
Right. And we've kind of, since we've revealed the game, we've kind of gone public with, just to give people an idea of what to consider when trying to define the experience. It's essentially a game like Star Fox or a game like Panzer Dragoon. You could even throw in something like Space Harrier. Even it's a game in which you have control over your position along the path. Like with Star Fox, it's the R-Wing. With Panzer Dragoon, it's the Dragon. But at the same time, you're also have 360 degrees of control or influence around you, so that you can. It requires the situational awareness that VR provides to attack targets that could be coming from any direction, pretty much.
Now, with the games with the games that you just listed, you've got me asking more questions because
go ahead.
I don't think any of the games you listed actually give you any control over your speed. Do you have full control over your bike?
Yes, actually, and to correct you, at least somewhat, Star Fox does give you control over your speed because you can brake.
It's been
as I
so
recall
long.
correctly. It was the button you always hit by accident when you wanted to, fire off your Nova Bomb. But but no, in Runner, you're able to control the bike because you have to weave around traffic. Like you have to, in some cases, avoid obstacles, and we'll probably talk about that at some point. But you also can use traffic as cover. So that when you have a tank bearing down on you, you can take cover beneath a big rig. For example, you probably noticed the big rigs have these wide bases you can drive under. And the traffic, some of the smaller traffic, like the cars, I think we called them pedestrian cars, which doesn't make any sense. But the non-combatants, their AI can take them under big rigs and things like that because they're driving down the road as well. But you can use it as a kind of a dynamic cover while you're playing, and you have to have control over where you're going. So you can speed up, you can slow down. We limited control in that you can't wipe out the bike. It's got to be accessible. So it's designed to be fun. So the movement of the bike should be second nature. We don't want people to worry about, I don't want to take this turn too sharp or I'm going to crash or wipe out or anything. So it's very much akin to what you'd play in the arcades to some degree.
Are the pedestrian vehicles, are they destructible? Is there collateral damage in this game?
There is for the most part the traffic that you encounter are not destructible, but some of them have destructible elements. Okay. And some of that will play a role as well. It's interesting because, when we started with the prototype and we had this, this bike driving down the road, and then, you start adding the other cars and then start adding the enemy vehicles and then start adding, additional behaviors for one or the other, it changes everything else around them because it will affect how the AI will perform. For example, if you start shooting at traffic, they'll swerve. Okay. And that they'll swerve out of your way, but they can also swerve into an enemy. For example, if something's ahead of you, as I said, you can use it for cover. You can use it as a distraction. But also, if the enemies shoot the traffic while you're trying to thread the needle between two cars, one of them can swerve into you and cause you damage. So, it has every time we add a little factor, it requires more balancing of the gameplay. But to your point, we are looking at right now. We're looking at having elements on some of the vehicles that are destructible that interact with the environment.
Nice. It's very cool. Very cool. One of our community members, Bel Ramio, asks, "Can you please ask them if they plan to add a sword and spiky blonde hair?" So,
no spiky blonde hair, though. You can bring your own if you choose. As far as a sword, we did talk about a melee weapon early on, but it's something that has to be. We realize it needs to be driven by the gameplay. It needs to be driven by the experience. Like it has to. Every weapon in the game, has to be useful, and we have like a bunch of different weapon classes, and they're all projectile classes. And there's even certain classes of weapon, like on your bike has an integrated cannon, it's called the bike gun or bike cannon. That it has a default mode. You can pick up, let's say, a double shot that adds another barrel, so you can fire, kind of fire two shots at the same time. Well, if you pick up a energy weapon, that shot becomes a wave. Like it will actually take two power-ups and combine them dynamically, which is really cool.
These are things you pick up during the level itself, kind of like an old school shoot 'em up, or is this more like a progression system sort of thing, like that you purchase between levels?
They're picked up on the level itself. We've basically designed the game to have a lot of unlockable elements, but it's also because it's an arcade game, we want it to be very pick up and play. Yeah. We want to have it very replayable, hence some of the procedural elements that we talked about, like in the press release. And there are multiple bikes to unlock, each with its own stats, but we don't have there isn't an experience system, for example, or anything like that.
This is the biggest question we kept hearing, and we got the question for various reasons.
Okay.
And I want to make sure that it's taken, that I asked this the way it's meant to be asked. And actually, you know what? I'm just going to let Barb Zarkov, the game cat, ask the question for me. He asks, what made you choose next gen PSVR to release on? Was it processing power, or the new controllers, or just the development time frame?
That's a good question, and I would say the answer is probably all of the above.
Yeah.
For various reasons. Number one, looking at the experience itself, we require higher fidelity 360-degree tracking than can be easily done with the Move controllers. It's not to say that it's not possible.
Right.
And certainly with 2MD, I think that I'm going to go off on a little bit of a tangent. Like we figured out a way to get some pretty high quality data from the Move controllers for 2MD. 2MD used the features of when the Vive controllers were released with the headset. Those have a lot of very accurate positional and velocity data that we use to calculate your throw. With the Move controllers, originally we were like, oh, we're up a creek, because all these do is this tracks position, and the ball has to be visible to the camera at all times to get accurate data. Like, how are you going to do that? And we found a white paper from 2009 that Sony had published on the Move controllers. And the white paper was talking about things like magnetometers, a gyrometer, like multiple sensors within the controller that people, for the most part, were not using for their VR games.
Interesting.
And we said we can take all this data. We were able to take the data and build a positional map, so we knew where the controller was with relative accuracy, even when the ball was obscured for a reasonable amount of time. And we could also calculate better velocity data than trying to calculate the position of the balls relative to the camera. So we definitely don't have any qualms about trying things with the Move controllers. But for Runner, with how we were trying to set up the way things come at you, and in the trailer you can see things are coming from above you, from behind you, from above and behind you, to the left, to the right, etc. We want you to be able to with confidence shoot those enemies and have a reasonable degree of accuracy. And one thing that has actually been a lot of fun in testing is the I don't know what you call it, it's like the no look takedown. It's like where you've got like a guy behind you and you're laying into him, and you realize, well, I haven't looked ahead of me for a few seconds. I don't want to run into something. And you look ahead of you to make sure you can weave traffic, but you've got your hand pointed behind you. You're still shooting the guy behind you. And you are, listening to the spatial audio of your bullets hitting his armor. You're hitting him.
Nice.
So being able to do stuff like that is really cool. And it's something that the PSVR, the next gen controllers allow. And then with regards to the other reasons, processing power definitely is a big plus. In order to achieve that look that we wanted in the game, and that you're kind of seeing with my broadcast here, that requires additional post-processing, and it also requires some special materials to be able to get that effect with the right kind of look that we want. And post-processing effects are generally very expensive in VR, and so having the extra processing the PS5 helps a great deal. Plus, the game is going to continue to evolve visually. Other thing is that there's a lot going on, and again, it may not be visible in the trailer because we haven't shown a lot of the game per se, but the game is actually rendering a lot of the city around you at high speed, and is doing it dynamically, while it's also, of course, generating the enemies and lots of particle effects and whatnot. So all of that we want to be able to we want to be able to have kind of a showcase experience, and we thought, well, doing it on next gen VR would be the best way to do it. And the time frame helps because it gives us plenty of time to develop.
Yeah, and for anybody who doesn't know, I mean, Truant Pixel's a pretty small team, right?
Oh yeah, there's 3 of us total.
That's a pretty small team.
Yeah.
Nice. And so, I mean, so can you tell me like how long Runner's been in development for? Like, has pretty much since like you were done with the Quest version of 2MD or what?
Yeah, pretty much. Because we released the Quest version of 2MD in January, and then we started prototyping Runner right after that because we wanted to do a different experience. We do something, a little more arcadey, and a little more sci-fi. And we actually had started prototyping it right around the time the pandemic hit. So it became a very good. It kind of became our quarantine project, essentially. While we were doing pre-production on other projects, which we have other projects we haven't announced, and doing the updates for 2MD on the PC and the Quest. We were working on this. So
Jay Meow asks, are there any elements of the game that weren't shown in the trailer that you can talk about?
we did talk about that there will be bosses in the game, and we just showed a brief snippet of one of the boss. Actually, there are 2 bosses in the trailer. The one at the very end, and I think we did a social media post about it. There's a large cycle enemy. It's called Razorback that jumps onto the road near the end of the trailer right before you see the giant mech boss. And that one is fairly big and fairly challenging. And that's the smallest boss in the game. And then the one that we kind of showed just kind of stomping down the road, that mech boss, that one's not even the biggest one. It's probably in the middle somewhere, because there's actually even bigger ones than that. And that was a lot of fun, designing how the boss encounters will go, at least how we intend them to go. But as far as other things we did not show in the trailer, okay, there is one thing. We didn't talk about it, but we mentioned in the press release that there are 7 levels in the game.
Mm-hmm.
That's not true. See, we're only about a week in, and we're already lying to everybody. Okay. There's more than 7 levels in the game. There's 7 levels planned for the arcade mode, which would be considered like the story arcade type experience. But we have other modes planned, and we'll have additional levels for those modes too. That will be thematically. Each one will be thematically distinct. So that's something.
I know that Jay was actually asking me about this question before he wrote it. He's like, how can I make this not sound offensive? But basically, I think just to kind of add to what he was asking, essentially, you're going to be on this bike shooting enemies for the entire game, correct?
Yes.
Okay, I think that's what he was really getting at. He's like, is there anything else? But he didn't want to sound disrespectful when asking that question.
Oh no, that's okay. Yeah, no, it's a very, again, because we're a small team, we want to focus on we want to focus on a high quality experience, and the main gameplay, because the main menu, you're not on the bike, and the main menu of the game, you're actually in you're actually in the alley that you see here, in fact, before you actually get on the road. But for the game itself, of course, yeah, you're on the bike because it's an escape. That's the idea. It's like it's a chase, and you're trying to get out of the city and get to freedom. So it's very focused on that.
Okay, how important is the story in this game? Because you certainly set up the premise with quite a bit of exposition, at least in the press release, and that's awesome. Obviously you can see the anime influences bleeding through quite a bit. But like, are there going to be like anime cutscenes between each level? Is there going to be voice transmissions happening during the race? Like, how is this all going to be delivered? How important is the story to you?
We're working out actually right now exactly how we want to do the exposition in the game, but I will say this kind of emphatically is that it's not going to interrupt the flow of gameplay. Like we don't want to do anything that's going to bring the game to a dead stop. To tell you what you're doing or why. Like we're trying to set things up. We're trying to use some environmental storytelling with how things, with the preamble to the main game, and there are, you'll have a quick break between levels, and we'll use that to provide some more environmental storytelling as well. But we're not going to make you sit through a 2D cutscene or anything like that. As much fun as it would be to do that. Now, it doesn't mean that we're not going to have those story elements. We are, and you kind of saw how we were doing them for this, all the preview stuff. Like, there's more of that, and there's probably more of that coming, and that may be something that's accessible from within the game too. But for the game itself, it's not going to. We're not going to interrupt the gameplay much, if at all, to tell the story.
Cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
Then one of the things I know a lot of people have been asking about as well is in terms of the controls. And you and I talked a little bit behind the scenes about this, but even I think I'm going into this interview a little bit unclear. So maybe you can help me out. Do you have your hands on the handlebars, or using the analog sticks to turn? I think you mentioned that maybe it's a little bit of both, but I'm not quite sure how that works.
So this is one of the things, and it's something that continues to evolve as we put together the game and balance the game. We started with a bunch of different possible control schemes. The first time we actually had you holding the controllers sideways, like handlebars on a bike, and then steering by moving them. And the only problem is that became very, not to insult the Wii, but it became very much like a Wii experience, like where you're trying to, like maybe we should release a plastic peripheral to hold the handlebars. We said, no, and that actually in turn was affected by the design of the bike itself. If you look at, and if you get a chance to look at the shots that we provided, you'll see that the handlebars are oriented vertically rather than horizontally, because the handlebars are the guns. They're integrated into the control yoke of the bike.
Okay.
And we thought that was very. We're like, this is so anime. Like this is like it was too perfect not to do. And the way it works is, you have to have one hand. One gun has to be docked almost at all times. That is the gun. It could be the right or the left, whichever one you're not, firing with. That one controls the trajectory of the bike, and you use the thumbstick to control the bike's movement.
Okay.
To rev, to slow down, to bank left or right. You use one of the action buttons to detach the gun. You can do one at a time. Like the way we have it set up is, you start with both hands on the controls, both guns docked. You press the action button to undock one gun. You use the trigger to fire with that, just naturally like you normally would. And then maybe the enemy is circling around you. You want to switch hands. You press the action button again. The gun will instantly dock back onto the controller. You can press the action button on the other controller to undock the other gun and continue firing. And you can go from steering with your left hand to steering with your right hand, which is really cool. You feel cool doing it because you're doing two things at once, and you feel like, I must look really awesome doing this. One fun feature of the controls is, if at any point you let go of the gun while you're driving, it's a physical object, so it will fall, but it has a magnetic tether that becomes visible once you drop it, and it pulls it back into the stock, or into the holster on the bike.
Nice. Which
is really cool. And we actually did that. I don't know if I caught it in the trailer or not, but one thing that's a lot of fun to do when you do when you're using rush mode, and you've like emptied both clips into an enemy, and you see he's like starting to, they're starting their like death animation. One thing that we started doing is a lot of fun is like, you just throw both guns up in the air as like time starts to speed up again, and they both like snap back into place as time like speeds up and you grab them again. It's really cool.
That is really cool. We didn't even talk about rush mode when I was reading the press release, and you're talking about rush mode and basically how you build the rush meter. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's very much burnout style, right? Like you use like near misses with other vehicles and doing dangerous things, right? And then you build it up, and then you can use it to slow time. Correct?
Right. So the way it works, and this is it's good that we talked about this because I mentioned that you can't draw both pistols at the same time, like
Right.
most of the time. Rush mode is the only exception because time slows down. And the so the way rush mode works is you have on the dashboard of the motorcycle, you have your shield meter, you have your rush meter, which is right above that, and then above that, and everything is analog. I love it. Above that is a rush gain rate, and you have a base gain rate which is pretty slow. If you hit full throttle on the bike, and the rush gain rate goes up, so you get rush energy faster just by driving fast.
Okay. Almost like a multiplier.
Right. It increases the rate. When you're driving past traffic, when cars are near the barrier, or when two cars are next to each other, for example, you see something called a rush zone appears. It's like a visual. We have like a visual cue. It's a glowing patch on the ground that indicates that if you drive over that, you will for a brief instant maximize your rush gain rate,
Nice.
and that gives you more rush energy. And then you also saw under the big rigs that I talked about, the same kind of patches appear underneath the big rigs. And in the trailer, we showed a big rig you can just drive straight underneath it, like you could be in the same lane and just cruise underneath it and gain rush energy. But there's some that their wheels are oriented differently, where you actually have to do a lane change underneath them to get to drive over the rush zone, and you get more rush gain energy for that. So you start chaining those together, and you'll maximize your rush pretty quickly. And then it's cool because it becomes like a secret weapon you get to use, especially when things get really hairy. When you have like a bunch of drones flying around you, and you have a Cerberus drone driving behind you or ahead of you, or somebody's dropping grenades and things like that. Like you can take your time. You have that brief luxury of time where everything is in slow motion, and you can prioritize the most dangerous targets. So it's really cool. It adds a tremendous element of strategy to it. But yeah, you've got to kind of drive dangerously to get there.
That's awesome. Geisen over on our Discord asked how many animes influenced Runner.
I'd say there's probably a good 3 or 4 to varying degrees, and they're all really they're all really old now. But I think we mentioned a few of them already. Like I think on the social media we talked about Akira, and we talked about Pat Labor. Bubblegum Crisis was a big one too, and there's shades of the original Ghost in the Shell movie. Little things like that. And it's not just in their it's in the style of the anime, but also the limitations of the medium they were presented on at the time.
Gotcha.
So, that plays into the whole. I think I've mentioned this. I think we mentioned it in the press release too. But the whole cassette futurism thing, which is basically it's basically like, and I may misdefine this. I apologize to anyone out there who's a big fan of this as well. But it's essentially taking old technology and iterating it forward, like imagining a future in which you're still using things like tapes and still using analog interfaces for things.
Right, it's like the Alien movies, right? You watch Alien or Aliens, and the first thing you see is a monochrome monitor, like 100 years in the future. It's like, what's going on here?
Right.
Yeah, I love it. Absolutely.
Yeah, and things like, ironically, the first Blade Runner movie, that
Yeah,
was again very much everything in there was like analog. You could hear like hard drives whirring and things like that. And it's like, this is supposed to be in the future, and this isn't anything like our future. But it has a certain, it has a certain appeal, a certain nostalgia to it. So yeah, that was a lot of fun. So.
Man, I feel like after this conversation, I'm not getting any work done tonight. I'm just gonna go watch like every single anime and every single movie we just talked about because it's all my favorite stuff. I absolutely love this. So just to kind of wrap things up a little bit, Hibsy asks, have you got a planned release date?
We internally we do, but we're very strong, very strong believers in iterating until it's ready, and also we believe in creators should have a what's the term here, like a healthy quality of life. So we don't crunch as a studio, even though we do our own development. We also do our own publishing, so no one ever puts us under the under the gun to get things done by a certain release date. So we try to make sure everything is set well in advance. But we're hoping to have it ready in a timely fashion, but a lot of that also depends on the availability of the hardware.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, the fact is Sony hasn't even announced when PSVR2 is coming. So for people who are like, is it going to be a launch title? It's like, we don't know. We don't know when the launch is. So.
Can't say. Definitely can't say.
You did mention you have other projects in the works. Will we be seeing any of those anytime soon?
Yeah, I feel they might be less relevant to this because they're not VR projects.
Okay. So we don't.
Although,
care. No, I'm kidding.
There you go. So, shut up, stop talking. No.
Cutting this out. No.
one of them is in the same. Ironically, and I swear it feels ridiculous to have like somebody in a 3-person studio saying this, but like there's another game that is actually in the same universe as Runner. It's like it's the same kind of narrative space.
That's cool.
But that's actually a much bigger scope game, but it's more of a traditional title.
Huh. Well, you might get me to play a flat screen game yet then.
Maybe. Or if I can convince the team to shoehorn a VR mode for me, so I can,
Yeah, I would certainly appreciate that for sure. But yeah, keep us posted, man. We're definitely curious to hear, obviously more about Runner as we get closer to release, and obviously whatever else you're working on. Just tangentially, we're curious to know, especially if it's related to Runner. That's cool.
Yeah.
But dude, thank you so much for taking the time out and talking to me today. This has been, one of the first real PSVR2 games that's been announced. And just for, I joked about it at the beginning of the show, but just for full transparency, it's not only coming to PSVR2. It's obviously coming to other headsets as well, right?
Oh yeah. With every platform that we develop on, we try to maximize the game for that platform in terms of technology, but we also try to focus on platform-specific features. With 2MD, the PSVR version is the only one that has multiplayer, and that is because the PSVR, every console has a social screen, and every console has that capability. And that was a challenge to put together for such a small team, such as ours. But and whereas the PC version of the game has its own little special features, and the Quest version has its special features too. So I think that that if players, as a lot of enthusiasts do, have access to more than one kind of VR headset, we want to try and make something compelling for them, so that they feel like an embarrassment of riches. It's like, oh well, then I can get this and do which is important to me, doing this or doing that. So I'm keeping it purposefully vague because I can't talk about hardware specific features yet. So.
I got that impression for sure. But when Sony did that hardware reveal or the controller reveal for the PlayStation VR2 or whatever it ends up being called, I think a lot of us got really, really excited to about the Obviously, the adaptive triggers and the touch sensors and everything like that. And in a game like Runner, I can automatically see all of this being extremely important.
Yes.
And, adding so much to the immersion. So we can't wait to see what you do with all that stuff.
Yeah. Cool.
All right, Em. Well, thank you so much, man. We'll definitely talk soon.
Sure. Thanks again.
Have a good one.